everyone. Welcome to the Retainers for Life webinar series, where we try our best to delve into some of the trends and innovations that is happening inside our field. And today I want to introduce you to Oliver Gales. He is the CMO over at OrthoFi, and he's also a respected co-author of the book Level the Curve. And he co-authored that with Dr. Jamie Reynolds. So Level the Curve isn't just another publication. I believe it truly is a game changer in the industry. Oliver was really meticulous in his research, and he produced some really surprising analysis results. So in this podcast today, we're going to dive deep into sort of all that wealth of knowledge that's contained in the book. I'm going to try our best to dissect some key concepts, explore some real world applications, and hopefully engage in some thought-provoking discussions that we aim to leave you inspired and empowered to actually implement some of these positive changes inside your practice. Hi, Oliver. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lorraine. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. So let's just jump right into it. I am in the middle of reading this book right here. I'm pretty sure you've saw this before. Now, I will go on the record as saying I haven't made as many chapters I would have liked to have made, but one of the first things that I thought was really interesting is how you started out the chapter. So the first chapter was the customer tells us how to stay in business, so we best be listening. And I thought it was really interesting why you chose the quote to begin with as essentially the very first page, the first words on the first chapter. And I think that that's going to tell us a lot of sort of where you're going to take us on this journey. So can you share that with me?
Absolutely. The quote's by Pamela Nelson, who's the CEO and president of a clinical healthcare research company. And it really stuck out to Jamie in particular. He actually selected the quote, but I love the quote because it's really an in-your-face way of setting the tone of what this book is going to do. The book is meant to challenge some of our notions. It's meant to really take a stick of dynamite to confirmation bias, which is unfortunately rampant, not just in our industry, but very much in our industry in many ways. And so it's a good way to set the tone that unfortunately many practices have been successful without adopting some of the tried and true success pillars that many businesses need to do to thrive, and starting with making the customer the center of your strategy. And I think that quote did a really good job of really simplifying it to the barest bones of why it's so important to make the customer the center and not make the business owner or the doctor the center.
I loved it especially because I think it allowed me, the reader, to almost flip a switch inside my head of how we're going to move forward in the conversation. And I think ultimately in the orthodontic industry is all too often we sort of get stuck in the mud somewhat, and we're just dealing with the today's to-dos, right? It's like, how much is on my desk today? What do I need to check off to get through the day? So I think that this is a mindset shift. And certainly I have now read my way through the first 40 pages. I promise I'm going to read the whole thing. But I'm absolutely astonished of what I learned in the first 40 pages. So your book talks about the results of your research, especially in the first chapter. You literally dove right into that. So tell me about what you learned, what was super surprising that you learned, and so essentially, what should we do with the information we learned? That's a huge question.
So when it comes to just tying in the quote, some of the earliest research that we did was really analyzing some of the review volumes out there, and looking at comparing some of our very best performing orthodontic practices and comparing to a business that, ironically recently went under, not because uh, it did not have consumer appeal, but because they weren't the best financial managers. But we looked at Smile Direct Club and we were really trying to compare what is it that consumers like about each business, right? The top performing orthodontist versus something like Smile Direct Club. The best orthodontists in the world like to, put Smile Direct Club and things like it into a small box and minimize it and sort of like put it away. And unfortunately, they have more reason to have that confirmation bias now. But what was super interesting is when we looked at the Google reviews, almost every characteristic that made it to the top of the list of why consumers love the top orthodontists, we literally did a word cloud and counted the number of times that certain words were used and all of this like scientific method. And many of the things were the same, including things like professionalism and quality and clinical knowledge and things like that, that as doctors you would never associate with Smile Direct Club. That's how you think you're differentiated, but the consumer perceived that those things were equivalent or they made it to the top of the list. The only main difference between the ratings of the two cohort groups was that when they were talking about Smile Direct Club, they mentioned also words like speed, ease, and convenience.
Mhm.
And those were absent from the top terms and words and reasons for high ratings among orthodontic practices, which we found to be very interesting. And what really led us down the path of thinking through is that maybe because in an orthodontic practice, we're not really putting the patient experience at the top of the list. We're trying to optimize it where we can, but it's not the center. And so
Do
that
you
was like
feel
one of the pieces of information.
that's super interesting? And I think it's a surprising finding, even though we understand that Smile Direct was convenient for a reason, or it was successful for a reason. But we always thought that it had to do with the dollars and cents. As somebody that perhaps was seeking orthodontic treatment was thinking, how can I save dollars and cents on this? But what we learned from your research was that patients hold near and dear to their heart, which is their time, right? Is time in going to the appointments. How can I, if someone's willing to put it in front of me and put it in my mailbox, is this an option that I would be willing to opt for? And I think that was really surprising.
Absolutely. And that is not the only time that we've seen that come up in research. So there's also a lot of other research that ranks attributes of a service in terms of like, you know, not only the appeal to the consumer, but how much, which attributes are they willing to pay more for? And a lot of these things keep coming up. So, at the list is things like efficiency, convenience, knowledgeable service, which we believe, we have, certainly an advantage as a specialty. Easy payment comes up-to-date technology and friendly service. So those are the things that, in general consumer research, not only come up as the most important and appealing, but what patients or in this, or consumers are willing to pay more for.
This is really interesting to me because one of the first steps that I made whenever I was asked to come on board with Retainers for Life was I decided to build out our avatar. And this was, it was a very interesting procedure because ultimately you're very busy and you think to yourself, what role could this possibly play? But again, coming back to your original quote, if we understand our patients and even understand their lives, how do we build a product around it? Now I'm on the corporate side, but that nothing changes from the orthodontic side, even just based upon your results are dictating that, is that we need to understand the avatar of the patient and in my case, the avatar of the orthodontist, to be able to build a product that people are going to say yes to.
Mhm.
If you were to build out an avatar, have like, what is the process? Because I think a lot of people say, well, first of all, what is an avatar? Let's cross that.
You're just helping to visualize who your target is. You're composing in a visual way, which is helpful. And I'm old school. I was trained in the very old school dark arts of marketing, as a young man. And I got a lot of great mentorship. And I used to actually do these exercises. We actually, drew
Mhm.
pictures of our target. And it was not because, we're going to be selling to, this particular demographic, male, age, whatever. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but just the exercise of trying to help visualize your target helped to also create a voice for that target that you could
Right.
speak to. It allows you to have a conversation with your target, and write for them and write to them.
So one of the first things that we did was, and if anybody's looking for a graphic on sort of how to manage doing that, if you want to take the time to do it, is we created the word patient in a circle in the middle of the page, and then we just lived the patient's life. I'm running to soccer. I'm getting my kids from school. I'm doing all of these things. I'm stressed out. I'm busy. I dream this, and you literally just on paper write the life of what you believe your number one customer will be. For us on the patient side, that it is the busy moms that have kids in orthodontics. So
Mhm.
we're talking about moms that are in a certain age group. And what that allowed us to do is, first of all, test some of our theories with the busy moms. Let's have a conversation with them. So we actually ran a focus group inside of my house, in fact, where we talk to busy moms in that world and then ask questions and wait for feedback. And as much as that seems like I've been in business for a long time, I know what busy moms' lives look like. I don't want to spend the time and effort on that. We walked away having learned things that we did not know because we didn't take the time to build out the avatar and ask the questions. Is that so? And your book speaks to that. It speaks to understanding the patient and understanding their needs. And one of those topics was affordability, that it actually didn't rise to the top of their top 10, let's say. In fact, it was quite low because the quick and easier was higher. Do you want to fill us in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are certain aspects that are threshold motivators. You have to reach a certain threshold, and then beyond that, there's no extra credit. You either check the box or you don't check the box. So there are certain things that are threshold motivators. But then when it comes to financials, the data was pretty clear that regardless of income level, what we saw is that yes, higher income people tend to have the ability to and the affinity to or the will to put higher downs or pay in full at a higher rate. And that makes sense. That's intuitive. What was super interesting is even in the very earliest researches, we found that the elasticity or willingness to pay was pretty consistent in the monthly. They did not, no matter what income level, the variance between what they were willing to pay on a monthly basis was very
Mhm.
similar. So the perception of what it should be to do orthodontic treatment was very similar. And then what we also found is that the prevailing variable is that monthly for
Mhm.
most consumers,
Mhm.
especially today. It's even more true today because so much of our economy, our personal monthly economy, is now in monthly bites, even down to how we've all moved towards streaming. And almost everything is monthly. Buy now, pay later is a huge ballooning, exploding trend, which has doubled and tripled over the last few years. So everything is being slotted into an increasingly crowded monthly affordability economy, even for the highest earners.
Mhm.
So that's really, what we built our entire concept on is how do I put something in front of the patient that gives them the open choice? There's no way any TC, no matter how good they are, is going to be able to look into the personal finance of the
Mm,
patient that they're in front of. And so the default static offer of I'm going to start with 20% down and then the rest over the number of months that I think they're going to be in treatment, yeah, you might be close to start, or you may not be close. But what you're doing by putting a static offer out there is that you're forcing a patient to have to negotiate or react to that.
mhm.
When if you give them open choice, many more times than you think, they're going to actually pick something that's better than what you would have offered them. And every time that they do that, they create positive cash flow leverage to allow a patient that maybe can't do the terms that you ideally want to still start with maybe a little bit lower down or a little bit longer plan than what you would have typically offered, but you're not forcing them to negotiate. They're choosing it themselves, which today's millennial wants to do. You're giving them the power that they have in every other buying decision that they have in their life. They're clicking away, they're choosing, they're in every other buying decision that they have. So you're putting them at the center again, which is what this is all about. And what we've seen is not only does it increase overall case acceptance, but it basically doubles, if you go by the national average, it doubles the same day start rate. So they not only are more willing to start, but they know that they can start today.
We know Tracy Martin's always up on stage talking about generations and their buying habits. What is your
Mhm.
thoughts on that? Because you touched on that a little bit.
It's brilliant stuff, and I love Tracy's content. I'm going to be lecturing with her a little bit at the AAO. We've got a lunch and learn together, so I'm a big fan of that. And I think we should all be students of our patients, and
Mhm.
we are making a transition in generation. We're no longer primarily marketing and selling to Gen X, which is ourselves, or at least me. We are now marketing to a different generation than ourselves. So we need to be students of them. And technology has made massive changes to buying behavior.
I'm pretty sure you're busy because aren't we all in the industry? It's a very busy industry. And when I meet someone like you and they tell it, and I discover that you're the CMO of OrthoFi and you've written a book and you're a speaker. What was the moment in time where you decided I need to write this? Right? You're busy, you're a speaker, you're successful. What was it that really inspired you and pushed you and Dr. Reynolds to say, the orthodontic industry needs this book?
Well, so it was a process. It was an accumulation. So Dr. Reynolds and we've been friends for a long time, 20 years to be exact. And we had written a couple of articles together. We had been geeking out on all the data. And so after a while, we had put out enough stuff where we kind of looked at each other and said, this is all great individually, but this actually needs to be woven together and be told in a story. And really, the motivation for me was to give back. Orthodontics has literally changed my life. It has enriched my life and given me, so many friends and experiences that I could never have gotten otherwise. And so I really got motivated to give something back to this wonderful industry that we have.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. If you were to give an orthodontist some really sort of put into action checklists, what would maybe be the first top 5 items that you would say? First of all, number one's read your book because you have to read your book. And if anybody's continued to watch to this point, if you email me, Lorraine at My Retainers for Life, we will provide you with Oliver's book. But I would be very interested in finding out sort of like the main takeaways, those like must do items that need to go into play if you want to be successful in the future.
Yeah. So I mean, we we are never going to get back to the way that this was.
Mhm.
Uh, Instead of bemoaning that and spending a lot of time cursing and kicking up dust about the fact that orthodontics is no longer what it was, that it's now business, let's just embrace it. We're still changing lives. We're still changing people's lives every day. It is by far the best job that has ever been invented, in my opinion, and I hope to come back as an orthodontist in my next life. I always say, I've said this on stage many times, the best part about being an orthodontist is not what everyone thinks. It is not the income. It is not the lifestyle. It is not all those things. It is that, unlike many jobs, the result of every single project undertaken ends in tears of joy and a balloon party. I challenge you to find another job that delivers that type of job satisfaction on a daily basis. That said, what I would tell an orthodontist is that they need to reorient their thinking. Remember that this is now a business with a customer. I know that it is a patient, but they now have customers. They no longer are getting the majority of their patients through referrals, where it is theirs to lose. They actually have to go and win people's trust and
Mhm.
win people's business. And once you reorient to that, you need to then think about the product itself. The product is not the actual clinical braces or the aligners. The product is the experience. And so really taking a hard and unvarnished look at what experience they are delivering to their patients and asking themselves the hard questions of, is this really the best experience for this patient? Or am I designing it around what's convenient for me and
Mhm.
then rationalizing that it will be okay for them? That is never going to be as good as designing what optimally would this patient want, which can touch many different things. It can touch how quickly you get a patient that's scheduled in. I have tons of research to show that that is an incredibly valuable problem to solve. Many practices are letting their booking window stretch out, and the average practice could have as much as $300,000 of revenue at risk by being cavalier about scheduling patients 2, 3, 4 weeks out.
Mhm.
So it can be something as simple as that. It can be how the phone is answered and how competently it's answered. It can be whether you accept assignment of benefits. It doesn't, for most practices, I don't need to be mentioning this, but even just this week, I came across a practice that had convinced themselves that they wanted to simplify their lives by not accepting assignment of benefits for insurance, which, if you're thinking about their interests, yes, I get it. It's much simpler. But what you are basically saying is that the patient now needs to deal with all of that paperwork and all that stuff. And we have, again, reams of data showing that there is actually marked lower case acceptance from telling someone to do that. So all of these things are around putting the patient at the beginning. Now, once you get there, you still got to get them over the financial hurdle, and that's where they need to adopt a different philosophy around financials. So I'm obviously a huge advocate for open choice, but also the concept of aggregate versus transactional financial concepts.
Mhm.
So many orthodontic practices base their fee terms on what each case needs to break even and make money. So, for example, last year, we saw that adult exams went down 4%.
Hmm.
Adult fixed appliance starts went down 4%. So that tracks, right? Adult
Yes.
exams is basically an indicator of demand. That could very well be the economy. That's not practice's problem. It's not their fault. But aligner treatment for adults went down 11%. And
Wow.
the only reason why that is because practices routinely require patients to put down the lab fee as the minimum down for that treatment. That is the only difference between that and all their other treatment modalities. And again, it's because they're thinking transactionally, where if I don't do that, I'm going to be cash light on this case. They're not thinking about all the times that they get $1,000, $1,200, $2,000 for a braces case that cost them $200. So when you think in aggregate, you realize that you benefit from this blend impact that can give you a very healthy cash flow so that you don't have to break even on each individual case. You build a healthy cash flow that in aggregate is healthy and drives your business, but then doesn't force consumers who, just this week it was published that the average American cannot afford more than $500 for an unplanned expense. So every time you're asking for $1,500 to cover a lab fee, you are asking for 3 times what all the data says that the average adult is carrying around with them to give you. So in my opinion, that's sales prevention.
That is super interesting. You know, there's a lot of discussions around the fall in adult treatment. And one person, and I don't know if it was in your book or if I read it somewhere else, but they talked about adults make decisions on orthodontic treatment based not out of need, but out of want. So in my mind, from a marketing perspective, is that we have to market to the want, and the need comes secondary to our marketing. What is your thoughts on that?
So I would agree with that and add to it. So the
Mhm.
difference between an adult patient or adult consumer and a parent seeking treatment for their child is that in the case of the child, because thankfully in this country, orthodontics largely for middle and up income is a rite of passage, it's an expectation.
Mhm.
They have likely been planning for it in addition to looking at their kid and realizing that their kid has some crooked teeth. So they've been seeing this coming and they've likely been planning for this. This has been one of the things that the family saves for, like college, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
When it comes to adults treating themselves, they've been living with this malocclusion for likely 20 plus years. So
Yeah,
it's not that they didn't see the need, it's what drove them to seek treatment today. And they have
great
likely
question.
not been saving.
Mhm.
This was an idea that they had in lieu of LASIK or some other cosmetic procedure or going to Europe or a lot of other expenses. They decided to do this spontaneously.
Mhm.
So they don't have $1,000, $2,000 saved up for this moment like they
Mhm.
do for their kid. They just had this whim. And so you have to actually consider them a completely different type of consumer,
Mhm.
and you have to get them to say yes today. Because with a kid, they're not going to not treat their kid. It's
Mhm.
not an if question. It is maybe a little bit when, but mostly by whom. With them, it could very well be if. And it could also be when. If they don't treat today, they could get distracted and do all number of things that could delay their decision to start treatment for a year, 2 years.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what we always say is adults need to be converted today, but if you don't convert them today, you need to follow them for a long time. So you
Yeah.
need technology to follow them through their journey in the hopes that in 6 months, when they remember that they needed to do this, that you're right in front of them at that time.
Mhm. It's almost that you would need to remind them of how excited they were and continue to boost the excitement every step along the way. But I couldn't agree with you more. It's with an adult, you have to, it's a whim. It is a, maybe I can do this. I wonder if I ask, and all of the answers need to be yes, right?
Right.
And they will literally make a decision and move forward. I think that's very interesting. I certainly have heard at a lot of the lectures that we've had recently is how adult treatment's down, and I'm always fascinated about why that was happening. I don't know if you know this or not, but Dr. Amy Jackson, who is actually the founder of Retainers for Life, you've perhaps met her a couple of times. She's actually the speaker this year at the AAO. So we're super duper excited about that. And her title, which is really interesting considering we of your topics that are inside your book, is why is that adult in my practice, not in my chair? So this speaks of volumes to how we need to get better at converting our adults. But she has a slide that was really interesting to me, and I thought maybe I could ask you more about it. And it's all about what is our total addressable market when it comes to adult, because we do know that our birth rate is changing.
Yeah, so I mean, we are blessed in many ways, as I said before, as an industry. And one of the reasons is that we are one of the few industries that know our total addressable market, at least for 80% of our market, um, in any given time that you want to know it by looking at the birth rate. 80% roughly of our patients are 11 to 12-year-old kids. And so all you need to know in terms of how many total 11 to 12-year-old kids is to look at the birth rate 11 to 12 years ago.
Mhm.
And what's super interesting about that, and Chris Benson and I have both lectured on this at various times, is that the birth rate actually peaked in 2010. It just so happened to have peaked in 2010.
Hmm.
And ever since then, it's been declining. So what does that mean? It means that last year, or this year, is the first year that we will actually have fewer kids to treat than the year before. And that will continue to be true every year for the next 10 years. So if you're a practice that wants to continue to grow, you're not going to grow by just simply inheriting more kids that are just going to
Mhm.
come through your practice. There's only two ways you're going to grow. You're either going to reach into a different target market white space, also known as adults, and
Mhm.
get better at converting them. There are roughly 100 million adults that need some form of orthodontic treatment. So there's plenty of them out there compared to the roughly 3.5 to 4 million we treat on an annual basis. Or you're going to have to win them from your competitors in your local community. And I would tell you that that type of trench warfare is unlikely to A, win you consistent growth, or B, win you any friends on the weekend. So um, the need to convert and learn how to convert adult consumers is not just an academic novelty that we should play with as a notion on weekends. It is a must, because this birth rate data, it's a fact. This is not opinion, as some of my stuff is. This is a fact.
I think that is super interesting, and it speaks volumes to us paying attention to the avatar of the adult. What are the needs, wants, and desires of that adult so that we can meet that need? And you actually talk about that in your book as well. So you talk about when you're in the treatment coordinators meeting in the office is, one of the things that I say a lot, in fact, in the company is when you ask me a question, I'm going to ask you three more questions. Because if you don't understand the need that you need to fill, you are not going to get a yes. What are your thoughts on that?
Always. I mean, that's the first step, right? You have to understand the unmet need, and you should not assume that an adult patient has the same unmet need that a parent has for their kid. In fact, there's tons of data that shows the contrary. So if you go back into your practice and you take a hard look and you realize that your patient acquisition process is the same for adult and patients, there's
Mhm.
probably something missing. You
That's excellent
probably need to
advice.
create a dual track and
Mhm.
look at it, like, start from a blank whiteboard and build a consumer experience for that target patient completely separately and differently than you do when it's a parent. Many things might be the same. Obviously, they need the same clinical diagnosis and some of the same things, but you will find that if you took a fresh look, you would build it very differently. And I would encourage you to do so.
Well, I would encourage you to go back to your little piece of paper and draw your circle in the middle and live the life of that patient for just a moment as an adult. I go to work every day. I'm in work 9 to 5, et cetera, et cetera. Just build it out. And as much as it will feel I'm wasting my time, you will reach the end of that process going, oh, hadn't thought of that. So I think that this is excellent. So thanks for sharing that. But there's also another hot topic, and I always, every time this is presented at a lecture, and we'll end on this question, I promise, but it's super interesting to me because of the industry that we live in and the world that we live in is this transparency of pricing.
Mhm.
So this is a fear. Every lecture that I have been to, it's being met with just that. It's being met with fear, but what if? I'd love your take on that. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm not as aggressive as some. There are some that are advocating for full, full frontal transparency of putting fees on the website. I'm not objecting to that. I'm not at a space where I'm saying no, that's a mistake. I do see why, because this is a service and because there are lots of qualitative things around it, that if the moment we start putting something on the website, then you make it shoppable without them being able to evaluate all the other things,
Mhm.
right? Now, that said, there is a reality to the way consumers operate today.
Mhm.
And so rather than putting the entire fee, because of what I know about how important monthly affordability is, what I would advocate is, rather than put
Mhm.
what your total fee is, I would advocate, if you wanted to explore and test out the effectiveness of transparency, I would advocate more for advertising treatments as low as payments as low as
Mhm.
X amount per month.
Mhm.
And that really is going to hit closer to home in terms of the consumer's perception of affordability anyway,
Yep.
versus a total fee. And all that you need to do is to get them to click one click further and make one phone call to get into your practice. And then it's on you.
Mhm.
So that's really my feeling. Like I said, I'm neither objector nor promoter. Um, I just believe that the monthly is more important.
Mhm.
So that's what I would focus on.
And lots of companies already do that outside of the orthodontic industry. Even if we just pay attention. I was on Alibaba the other day. We were looking for products, and it was this retainer case is between 55 cents and 85 cents. And I thought, oh, that's the company for me, because really what the consumer is seeing is 55 cents, right?
Right.
And that allows me to make a decision that this is a possible company I could work with, because
Right.
it's going to fall within my budget. And I can't imagine it's any different than a patient looking for an orthodontist. Is this guy down the street's not telling me any information, but this guy over here is giving me a range of monthly payments that I believe is doable for me.
Right.
So I think it's amazing. I think certainly I've been in the industry for 32 years. I'm excited by the growth and the change of mindset and what we're learning as an industry. And we get to thank companies like Smile Direct for that, because they opened a window into a world that we needed to pay attention to. And I believe your book does just that. So as I said, everybody, if this is a book you want to read, and I highly recommend it, you can just email me, Lorraine at myretainersforlife.com. I'm going to make sure you get a free copy. Oliver, thank you so much. I truly, truly appreciate it. I hope you come back and we can make our way through the rest of the book. Let's read it together. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine.